segment, or in the initial introduction, we talked about the fuel subsidy and bankruptcy in Nigeria. Now, in Nigeria today, besides national security, the most contentious issue is whether or not to remove subsidy on premium motor spirits, PMS, also known as petrol. Now, over the years, the federal government operated fuel subsidy with the aim of making petroleum products available to cushion the effect of actual market prices of the products on the general populace.
But that goodwill by the federal government has come at a huge cost. Last year alone, over ₦1 trillion was spent on subsidy from January to September. Several economists see the subsidies as hugely corrupt, wasteful, and bleed money from the treasury into the pockets of rich fuel importers who manipulate the figures as they like.
Smuggling subsidized fuel to other countries was also commonplace amongst marketers. Now, the IMF has long advised the federal government to remove the subsidy, which costs about $8 billion annually. The Finance Minister, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, and Governor of the Central Bank, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, have also argued that removing the subsidy would free up money to invest in other sectors of the economy, perhaps also reduce poverty in the country. But there seems to be mistrust between the government and the group like labor movement insists that the removal of subsidy is inimical to the generality of Nigerians and that it will lead to hike in cost of foods, goods and services. So what should be done? Because a huge deduction to federal government and subsidy payment has created a situation whereby states are virtually broke.
In our interview today, we shall take a look at both sides and carefully analyze the subsidy removal or bankruptcy as the price of fuel keeps falling every day. Should the federal government remove the subsidy, save money and make some available for states for development, or should the subsidy payments continue and in the process deplete the reserves and perhaps resort to borrowing in the future? Joining us in this discussion is Chief Emeka Okengwu. He's a management consultant. Welcome to Kakaki this morning. All right. We also have Chichi Ashiwe, economist and consultant. Welcome, sir, to Kakaki, the African Voice.
Thank you.
All right, I'll start with you, Chief. Now, looking at what has happened with the management of the fuel subsidy, a lot of people, especially Nigerians, seems to misunderstand the concept fuel subsidy. Now, looking at the history, what can you say actually fuel subsidy is to the layman?
Thank you, Adora. I think the first thing is that I think everybody has even misunderstood what fuel subsidy is. So let us begin by trying to put a definition to fuel subsidy. Fuel subsidies, or subsidies rather, are usually production-driven instruments. Okay? What you do is to subsidize somebody's capacity to produce and then deliver to the market at a certain cost. Now, what has happened in Nigeria is that we've not had fuel subsidy. What we've had is price differential.
Okay.
Where people now decide that people should be able to get this product at this amount. So whatever else is cost in the international market, we are going to be paying the differentials. Okay? Which is why, over time, the factors of demand and supply now kicked in. So each time you go to buy fuel and there's price increase, of course, when you have a lot of demand and supply, there's this price hike. So each time they now go to now buy more fuel and the price of fuel increases, they keep now paying those differentials to be able to now make certain that we get this thing at this, their so-called calculated cost, that it can be available to the poor, to the common person. Now, you see, some time ago, when this fuel subsidy crisis or whatever started and they set up a committee, I had the privilege of coming to Kakaki to say that as far as I'm concerned, everybody in that mix didn't understand what they were doing. And that this was some kind of, I don't know, Roman circles, and that's the least I can be able to call it. Why? Because in setting up even the fuel subsidy probe, there is what they call taking evidence under caution. And what does taking evidence under caution mean? It simply means that whatever you say can be used against you in the court of law. And for you to be able to get to that point where you can start getting somebody to give you evidence under caution, one or two things must be in place. You must be able to now look at the judicial constitution of that panel. And in that case, you must be able to now involve the people who have the legal right to now compel you to now take or give evidence under caution. So for all I care, what I said 6 months ago was that what government had said was, let us remove this subsidy. And then in 6 months' time, let us see what we'll now do. Give us a chance for the public to be able to see what we're going to do with the savings. But the moment they brought that, the more you look, I said to people, we are missing the whole point, because everybody who's supposed to be applying these subsidy funds or subsidy savings is in the House of Reps, giving evidence that will not be used for anything. 6 months down the line, I wish Kakaki would replay that tape. What has happened? After all that years I do and changing and hours of wasting public and tax people's money, what has happened? The federal government has come out to a position to say, what you have given us is not enough. Does not have any legal, framework for us to start trying people. But what we can do is that we can take your document and then give it to the people who cannot take evidence under caution and then apply it. So first and foremost, we must be able to understand that what we are talking about here is not fuel subsidy. What we are talking about here is price differential. So if we take it from that perspective, now we can now begin to talk about the issues that can arise out of a system that now begins to pay for what it doesn't even know why it's paying for, which is where we are today.
Emeka, I come back to you. 2011, over 1 trillion naira was spent between the month of January and September. And I remember also the IMF, did tell Nigeria, and the World Bank have been calling on Nigeria to adopt a flexible exchange rate which can open up the economy as well, and so that Nigeria can look inwards and diversify, because as it seems we are only dependent on oil at this moment. Now, what does this mean? Assuming that the subsidy is removed, what does this mean for the Nigerian government? Because already the government is saying that there is going to almost be an outcry of cashlessness for Nigeria. Now, what does this mean for the government? And if the subsidy is not removed, what does it mean for the Nigerian man? So where do we come to part? Where's the bridge?
Again, I like to take my things out of the box, Adora. First and foremost, you don't have an economy, you have a market. In the past, between 2010, you had $1.2 trillion as FDIs that flew around the world. Let me not talk about Europe and America that got, I think, 300, 400 each. China got 175 billion of that money. Brazil got 45 billion. Russia got 41 billion. You know how much Nigeria got? 9.8 billion. And most of it went into the aviation sector. That is all about aesthetics. Are you listening? Mm-hmm. So when somebody says to you, open up your economy, what are you opening up? Because you must be able to have the parameters for an economy to open before you can open. And there are two things that can open up an economy. Your human capital, your natural resources, and the technologies you apply to these two things. Are you listening to what I'm saying? So anybody who says to you, remove subsidy, first and foremost, let us correct an impression. It wasn't 1 trillion. It was 2-point-something trillion, and it's still counting. I suspect that by the end of the day, what Dr. Chichi is saying here, I don't think it's corruption. I think it's madness. You see, because when you don't understand what you're doing and you're trying to defend it, and you're now putting these things even in legal documents. I mean, part of the position of government was that they were going to, in fact, they actually even started, bringing out projects that were going to fund with the 1.4 trillion that they were going to be saving from these price differentials. I hate to call it subsidy. But let me go a little bit further. You see, Adora, when you want to develop an economy, first and foremost, look at what you had as an economy. Nigeria was the biggest exporter of columbite and tin ore. Is this correct?
True.
Nigeria was one of the largest exporters of palm and cash crops.
The largest, yeah.
Is this correct?
Yes.
Correct.
What were the things that happened before we could get to that
Second
point?
largest exporter of cocoa.
Now, there's a research institute they call NIFO in Benin. The first thing they did when they wanted all our land was to set up NIFO. NIFO was like, if you drive into NIFO, it was like driving into the best part of Miami. And then the next thing they did, from your name, I think you come from that area. What they collected is why we will never be able to get food security, because every arable land in this country that can secure you vis-a-vis food security has been planted for your cash crops. And the day the people didn't want the cash crops again, nobody has bothered to ask ourselves a question. I was listening to you guys this morning when you were running the Minister of Agriculture. This is a government that says we have captured 5 million farmers. You're talking about an economy, because we're going to be getting into bankruptcy. And then in these your 5 million farmers, they can produce 5% of what your total national food intake is. And you come out and you're advertising a bread that has 90% wheat and 10% cassava. And you are spending $1 billion importing the 90% of that instrument that you're using to make the bread. And America has less than 300 farmers, and they are producing wheat and throwing it into the sea. Do you know why? Because there is a proper romance between human capital and natural resources. So when you're talking about saving money to free the economy, a minister comes to work in 4 SUV vehicles. If you give him more money, he will buy 10. A governor comes to work. When I was driving into the studio, the major street of Asokoro is where you have government houses. All of them are multi-mansions. Look into those compounds. They have SUV cars parked there that are never driven, apart from to go and pick up the man or his family from the airport. And in that process, they are driving people into the gutter. If you give him more money, he's going to buy more jeeps. Way back he was Pathfinder. Now it is the ones that are now bulletproof. Each of them will cost 50 million. So why are we not looking at this thing beyond what it is? I think there is some sense of madness that has caught all of us in this country.
So the federal government needs to look inwards and begin to cut its own excesses if it's afraid of bankruptcy, of national bankruptcy.
We have been bankrupt forever. We have never been a solvent nation. Because in the first place, a lot of you do not understand that these 2 million barrels of oil that you produce every day, the only thing that you can use the way you want is the 445,000 barrels. Which is why you can't even get your local refineries, because those barrels are tied to refineries.
Okay.
Listen, do you know that they are importing diesel from Niger Republic?
Of course, the government, instead of looking at welfare and unemployment, are rather, thinking about creating refineries and getting oils, exporting oil from other countries, and thereby taking the work that is meant to be for the Nigerian youths outside and multiplying the income of these societies. Now, when he looks at subsidy and, the removal of subsidy, he thinks that for the economy, like you said, there is no economy. But when he looks like letting the subsidy stay, then it almost means that you're asking the Nigerian youth to commit suicide. So for you, in a nutshell, what does that mean?
There's something they call institute values. What are institute values? Institute values are actually now determining the value of your resources in the ground. And you can actually now sell them. Now, everybody talks about Nigeria being rich in natural resources. Let me just give you one little example. Imagine where we are able to put into perspective a program to capture 2 billion cubic feet of water within Abuja. And we are able to put meters in everybody's house to procure these 2 billion cubic feet of waters at a minuscule cost of 100 naira per cubic meter. Do you know how much you're talking about? You're talking about raising 2 trillion naira, if my mathematics is right, or 200 billion lower limits. Now, all of us travel. The first thing we need to do, Adora, is to create what you call an economic substructure. And when you have an economic substructure, and your substructure now develops what they call your demand-driven infrastructure, okay? It begins to tell you, elementary economics says that the factors of production is that whoever controls the production process controls the economy and ultimately the politics. Now, the politics level is what they call the superstructure level. When you have your decisions being driven by the superstructure level, you now have a man who will wake up and say, I had no shoes, so I buy shoes for all of you. I'm going to sink boreholes, I'm going to build hospitals, I'm going to do this. And now he comes in and that man says to you, oh, I've been out of government for so long, I didn't know it was this bad.
All right.
Give me time to now understand it. But what's the way to go, ladies? I think the way to go, like I said, is first and foremost, let us look at our natural resources, inclusive of our human capital. Nwike, who is the Minister of State in Education, went to Korea and came back. What did he see there? Korea had a large belt of skills. By the time you are 12, you are skilled in whatever it is you want to become. Until we develop our human capital, remove subsidy, put subsidy. Subsidy is not the issue. We are subsidizing everything. We are subsidizing power.
All right.
We are subsidizing agriculture. We are subsidizing everything that we do in this country. So PMS subsidy is what, if you go to the power sector, you will see more money being subsidized, being lost to the power sector than what you have in PMS.
All right.
That's the truth.
Thank you so very much, gentlemen, for joining us. We've been joined by Chief Emeka Okengwu, Management Consultant. We'll be looking at fuel subsidy and bankruptcy. Both men agree that Nigeria has no business being poor. Nigeria should learn to develop its human capital.